Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Utility Week webinar, Achieving Digital Agility, Centrica's Journey Through Coronavirus and Beyond, brought to you today in association with Citrix and Fujitsu. In this session, we'll be taking a close look at Centrica's operational experience during the peak of the global coronavirus crisis, and in particular, talking about what aspects of its digital transformation strategy pre-existing the pandemic allowed it to flex its operations quickly and easily during lockdown. We'll explore the technology building blocks within this strategy, but also hear about Centrica's approach to managing the human side of digital transformation and how the lockdown environment really transformed that interface between people and workplace technology. Finally, of course, we'll dig a little bit into how the COVID experience has reshaped Centrica's approach to digital transformation and try to shed a little bit of light on where it will be focusing its next steps now that we are hopefully heading into a new normal, so called. To give us the inside story, joining us we will have James Boswell, Director for Global End User Computing at Centrica, who will shortly talk us through the essentials of Centrica's digital transformation thinking pre, mid and post-COVID. After that, we'll also welcome some additional insights and reflections from the technology partners which have helped make that thinking a reality. And those thoughts will be brought in by Steve Anderson, Global Client Executive for Centrica at Fujitsu, Citrix's technology partner, and Ben Lancaster, Director for UK Enterprise and Commercial at Citrix. And finally, we'll have the opportunity for you to pose your own questions to all of the speakers involved in today's session on whatever points are of most interest to you. Please don't feel like you need to wait until the end, though, to pose those questions. If you submit them throughout the webinar in the submission field that will be visible to you, then you can make sure that your questions are ready and waiting for us when we get to that Q&A section at the end. Okay, so we'll dive into the meat of the webinar now. So I'd like to welcome now James Boswell to join us on the webcam and to talk us through Centrica's story. Hi James, thanks for joining us. So before I leap into my questions, I'll just very briefly outline for our audience the evolution of Centrica's digital transformation journey from a key turning point back in 2016 up until the world just pre-coronavirus. So James, do pick me up on any points that I'm wrong, but as I understand it, there was a key turning point for Centrica in 2016 where the organisation really absorbed a realisation that its technology setup wasn't maybe giving it the capabilities it wanted in an energy market which, as I'm sure all our listeners will understand, had really transformed in a few short years. And in response to this, Centrica embarked on a digital transformation strategy, which was designed to give it far more scalability and flexibility in its operations. And that included embracing the then very new cloud-based Office 365 suite from Microsoft, and also setting up a virtual desktop solution for Centrica's staff so that everyone working in different functions and in different locations could have a consistent experience and interface with the core business systems that they needed for their roles. And that first phase of the virtual desktop was supported via on-premise servers, but ultimately that there was a realization came into being that limited the flexibility and scalability of that desktop solution. So come 2019, Centrica had decided to take that solution to the cloud, which delivered cost savings for the business, but also enhanced the capabilities of the solution rather. There was a very quick development time for that solution. In around 5 months, it was brought into being, and including a bespoke solution for people working in the energy trading arm. So at the point in which coronavirus hit, that solution had been designed and rolled out to all UK employees at Centrica and also to users in third-party or partner organisations. So at that point, having painted a little picture, I'd like to turn to James to add a little bit more colour and detail. So James, I hope that's painted a pretty much accurate picture, and I wonder if you can help us by telling us a little bit more about what it was that Centrica was really trying to achieve through that that digital transformation strategy and that journey to date.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really good overview of what we're trying to achieve and what we've been doing over the last 4 or so years. So ultimately, we're aiming to become more agile and more flexible in the solutions that we use from an IT perspective. And that's really the end game there, is to improve the service we provide to our customers and improve the service that we offer our employees internally as well. And also, as you mentioned, to reduce costs. And also to react when we get unforeseen circumstances like COVID. Without investing in the technology that we have, for example, Citrix, we wouldn't have been able to scale and offer the solutions and services that we have done as an IT department to our organisation. So it's really about making sure the business is agile, flexible, and can react fast to the changing needs of customers and employees, because it's very different now to it was in 2016-15.
Sure. So could you give a little bit of detail of what the actual technology building blocks are within that strategy? So what is going to make it a reality?
Yeah, so from an end user computing perspective, we moved from Windows 7 to Windows 10, we moved to Office 365, and then we've moved to the new Citrix cloud platform. We've done most of that transformation with Fujitsu, and obviously with Citrix, for the Citrix part of that. But what we've also done, we've also moved all of our applications into the public and private cloud. So we have a multi-year cloud strategy, and our strategy is a cloud-first strategy. So everything goes into the cloud where possible. And in fact, we've got very, very few on-premise applications left. So the Citrix solution is essentially Citrix Cloud with Azure and Windows 10 multi-session. And as you said, that's used by our internal employees and all our third-party partners. So it gives them access to every application we have in our estate quickly, easily, and securely.
Okay, so focusing down onto the virtual desktop solution, I wonder if you can just give a little bit more detail around how it works and what experience it is that it actually delivers for Centrica's employees.
Yeah, so the Citrix platform is utilising the Citrix Cloud. The worker servers are all in MS Azure. We've just moved from Server 2016 to Windows 10 multi-session, which has actually brought us a large amount of benefits. So something well worth looking at doing. We've made sure it auto scales. So it scales depending on how many people are using the solution, and that's been massively beneficial, especially during COVID, because in effect we didn't really have to make any technical changes to scale up for more people using the solution. It replaced an on-premise complex system that was end of life, and the cloud proposition and platform was the right way to go for us, because it enabled us to control our costs and also to control the demand and flex in the business, whereas before it took us a few months to stand up extra capacity. Now we can do it in minutes, so it's a game changer for us in that respect. The experience people have, they can access it on any device, they can access it on their phones, they can access it on their personal devices, on corporate devices, so it's very, very flexible, and is used all around the world with different partners and third parties.
Why was it that you needed a different solution for the energy trading segment?
We needed a slightly different solution there because some of their applications are still on premise. So we need to locate the Citrix service next to our trading platforms. Some of those trading platforms will move to the cloud in the future. And when that happens, we'll be able to move the Citrix platform into the cloud as well. So it's just a different dynamic and speed and reaction to trading rather than our call centres and office-based staff need a slightly different solution there.
Okay, and so that was all kind of in place before coronavirus arrived. So I wondered if you can just talk about how it is that technology solution responded to the arrival of the crisis, and kind of how it has performed for you.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because it in fact was a massive help. As I said before, as soon as lockdown happened, we'd done a lot of prep work. We had made sure our internet bandwidth was where it should be. We'd made sure all our call centre agents had access, and one of the ways we gave them access was using their personal devices and then using the Citrix platform to access all their applications, all their telephony, etc. And we're able to stand that up in a matter of minutes. So to give people access was the easy bit. The more tricky part was explaining how to access it, etc., and get them to use it. But yeah, the technology was there ready to go, and because of the auto scaling function, we were able to scale that out massively within a few days. So we went from say 100 people using it in UK, because right up into 3,000 people in a matter of a couple of weeks. So there's a massive expansion really quickly, fairly straightforward, no investment in lots of different technologies. We're using the same technology, and we worked closely with Citrix and Fujitsu to do that. And yeah, it was a great success.
And you've kind of referenced the user experience a bit already, but from a kind of a people perspective and a cultural perspective, do you feel that the arrival of coronavirus really kind of was a game changer for your digital transformation strategy for the adoption of technology?
Yeah, it's been massive. So as soon as Corona hit, obviously people were in the office before, then they've gone to working from home in a matter of days. So one of the biggest things we've seen is a much increased usage of the Office 365 suite. So for example, things like Microsoft Teams, our usage went through the roof almost instantly. And we've seen a lot more collaboration as a result of that. There's more people co-authoring documents. Some of our users, employees who wouldn't use Teams necessarily in the future, in the past, are now using it. We're doing virtual town halls using Teams Live. So the technology adoption has massively increased. And not only that, people have started to explore some of the more complex areas of Office 365. So for example, using Power Apps to replace business processes. So using no-code, low-code solutions. Whereas before they might have been a bit nervous to look at that kind of stuff. It's really driven towards people using that. And internally, we use a network of digital champions to help people understand the new technology, how to use it, and be a guide for people in the organisation. And that's 600 strong group of people, and that's really grown during lockdown, and people getting more and more bought in to using the new technology. So it's been really fantastic to see that drive in using technology, and it's made a big difference.
Just flipping back to the more technical side of things, away from people, what would you say was the most kind of technically challenging part of either pre-COVID rolling out or during COVID scaling up?
I think the most challenging technically during COVID was making sure everybody had an appropriate device to use, because quite a large number of our employees utilised desktops previously in an office. And when they've gone from home, they've had to use either their personal laptop or a company provided laptop, and that was quite tricky, the logistics around doing that. But also it was challenging making sure that we had the right capacity on the VPN, the right internet bandwidth for our VPN. So we had to do quite a few checks before the lockdown happened. We recognised it was going to happen and spent a frantic 3 weeks making sure everything was set up ready to go. And luckily we managed to do that in time for when the lockdown started. Other technical challenges. Actually, it was pleasing to see actually that some of the technology challenges went away. So some of the red tape we normally go through our governance process was removed because of the situation we're in. And actually we realised that some of that governance wasn't necessarily required, or we could move through it quicker or get the right people in the room quickly to make those technical decisions. And actually that helped us be much more agile and much more flexible. And that's something we'll be taking through into our normal BAU operations, whatever they may look like in the future. So yeah, it was quite interesting in that respect.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That's really interesting. turning to the future then, would you say that at this point you feel like your digital transformation objectives are the same as they were when you were going into COVID, or have they changed in any way?
I think our overall objectives are the same. I think within the company, we've realised that actually we can move faster than we thought we could. We can be more agile. We can make decisions quicker. And whatever our future ways of working look like, there's a lot of barriers that have been removed. So the whole company working from home, if you said that to us a year ago, we would have said, well, I don't think that's possible. It's too complicated. There's a lot of barriers in the way. But actually, we've proved that can work. So from a transformation perspective, I think the adoption has been massive, which is great. So people have adopted the transformation that we've made, but also it gives us the confidence to move along that next stage of the journey, which is going to be removing some of our legacy estate, using more SaaS services, and also, as I mentioned earlier, using things like Microsoft Power Apps to get our business colleagues and employees to create their own applications and create their own fixes to process issues and complex business challenges using low-code, no-code solutions, so that we can really drive the company forward and be quick and agile and make sure that we serve our customers and our employees.
Great, thank you, James. Okay, well, at that point, I'd wonder if I may, I'd like to add some perspectives from Centrica's technology partners on this programme of work. So to do that, if I could ask Steve and Ben from Fujitsu and Citrix, respectively, to join us as well on the webcams.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us, guys. So I wonder if I could first ask Steve, perhaps, you've worked very closely with Centrica through this journey. I wonder if I could ask you to just add your reflections to what James has said so far, maybe give your perspective from the technology partner point of view.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, and I guess taking a look at that, as James said, it's a journey that we started in 2015, 2016. And what's been so good enough, if you like, so consistent, is by having that digital transformation point of view, we've managed to get ourselves into a position where all of us have been able to move forward and address the really challenging times that none of us expected to be in, by having that digital and cloud first strategy in place for all of those years. So it's Centrica's forward thinking which has allowed us almost to be in this position. So I think we've got that to thank for. And then if we then just focus in over the last 6 to 9 months, James, on the move to that virtual workspace, the key thing that we wanted to have in place, as James has shared, is we were challenged as to how quickly we could turn things around when demand from the contact centers changed. And by having everything in the cloud with Citrix, we can now literally turn around in minutes, if not seconds, to scale up and to support those users. So some really good things that we've been able to do to support the business and support Centrica's end customers.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Steve. Ben, I wonder, do you have anything to add there, maybe from a broader perspective in terms of what Citrix is seeing other organisations do, sort of in relation to what Centrica has moved through?
Sure. Yeah. No. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I have the benefit of looking across multiple different industries as well as across the whole of the utilities sector, and different organisations are in they're in different states of their technology adoption. Centrica and the work they've done with Fujitsu puts them ahead of the pack, really, in terms of the usage of cloud technologies. We have other clients where they've all been faced with the same challenges, and during March and April, everybody was very much in their react phase. How can I get my people working? And it's great to hear James talk about how smooth it was, how easy it was to move from 100 or so users to thousands of users without large capital expenditures and all sorts of different challenges. With other organizations, we've been helping them just in the same way, but the ability to go from 100 to several thousand has been much more challenging in terms of just procurement processes. They had to go out and buy infrastructure They've had to think about their network connectivity. They've just literally the procurement process alone takes longer than it took James to get his people up and running. So the difference we're seeing where that digital agenda has been kind of like accepted at a board level and is cascading down throughout the organization and allowing IT to respond from a more of a business enabler as opposed to just a IT support, kind of cost center perspective has been huge, and you can see the benefits for yourself in terms of what James has been talking about. But what James has done is not, we haven't seen that consistently everywhere because people are at different stages of their digital transformation, but it goes to show what the benefits can be.
Thanks, Ben. That's very helpful. Steve, I was wondering if you could pick up. James talked a bit about the attitudinal changes that he saw within Centrica from individuals and as well as from the business as a whole to technology as an enabler, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you have any thoughts. Perhaps not specifically in Centrica's case, but from a broader perspective on whether you think that those kinds of attitudinal changes will stick post-coronavirus. Are these kind of shifts that we're going to see for the long term?
Yeah, and I think in a word, yes, they are going to stick for the long term. I think, and James mentioned it, or certainly alluded to the word I'm going to use of trust. So before the coronavirus challenge, I think there was a lot of question of people can't work from home, they're not able to do certain things at home, they won't do the work at home, they'll be doing other activities, and companies won't get, if you like, the value for money. And I think what we've really seen through coronavirus and through our experience with Centrica, but also through Fujitsu's experience with other clients, is people are now comfortable and are working at home and they are delivering, and that trust is there. So I think it is something that we've proven a lot of myths, or we've taken away the perception that it would be a challenge. And I think because of that, we have seen companies, well, Fujitsu themselves in Japan have announced that there's going to be a move to home working for 80,000 of our colleagues in Japan. We've seen RBS, who Fujitsu also support RBS NatWest, with Citrix, announced that they're going to keep the status quo until the back end of this year. And I think next year we're going to be seeing people, as they move into this resilience phase, to look at their strategies, changing their strategies. And we're having conversations with other companies about having a 40 to 75% move of work to be undertaken in a more flexible way, whether that be from home or from a coffee shop or from a different office location or a hub location. So I really think that everything we've seen means the strategies are being rewritten, and that's a lot of the language as well we're hearing CIOs and CEOs use. It's about strategies being rewritten to have more flexible working in place.
Ben, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can really agree much more with Steve. I think the implications of this, obviously, if everybody has shifted to remote work, whilst it's been pretty impressive, and the human spirit, we're very adaptable. We've gone from this status quo of commuting into suddenly everybody working remotely, and we're doing a pretty good job of it across all industries, is what we're seeing. But I think there needs to be a different level of engagement between HR and IT, because in terms of the employee health and welfare, I think that's kind of the next focus, and that resilience isn't just in resilience in terms of running a business, it's resilience in looking after your staff. And whilst the technology is there, and it has been for a while, we've obviously seen a massive acceleration in the adoption of that technology. Technology isn't, it's just one part of how we cope with this. We've got to look after the people and ensure that they don't suffer too much from the digital fatigue of constantly spending time in teams. It's we can do a lot remotely, but it presents a new challenge to leadership in general. It's not just CIO, it's the CEO, it's a whole change of strategy. And I think with these platforms in place, while they've been great for this pandemic that we're in, they weren't really built for that pandemic. They were built for a different reason. What James was doing, and most companies' BCP strategies were built for like a flood or a one-off event that took people out of an office for a short period of time. And now we're seeing people working indefinitely from home, and the changing culture at the likes of Fujitsu and RBS and many other organizations. Like, we're going to be living in this world, whatever happens. And then you have to have a different way of engaging with your workforce. And the platform itself that you've got enables you to think differently about how you run your business. And so it's not just a change in kind of the employment engagement, but it's also a change in the business strategy that being able to attract and retain different talent because you have this remote capability. There's all manner of implications that I don't think people have yet had the time to really think through how they can kind of run their businesses in the future, because we can do a lot now, and the capabilities we have are pretty incredible.
Yeah, can I just add to that? So
Yes.
the other thing that we found that we've had to do is we've had to change all our support processes and business operational processes to fit around the new ways of working, which has been lagging a bit behind the technology. So it's been quicker to change the technology than it has to change the processes and the support functions. So it's really important that we think about that alongside the technology change.
Yeah. That's great, James. I was going to come back to you at that point anyway, to sort of say, given everything that's been said so far, I wonder if you could just sort of say a little bit more about where you think the next steps, but for in terms of business strategy and its interface with your technology strategy are. I know we've talked a bit and Ben touched on it there about business continuity in particular and how that might change. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so there's a lot happening on that in Centrica at the moment. There's a panel set up to review our future ways of working, and there's lots of our experiences that we've had during COVID being fed into that. And we've seen the art of the possible during COVID. It's gone from one extreme to the other. So there's a lot of discussions happening at the moment about business continuity and how we move that forward. But from a technology standpoint, I think we've got most of our ducks in order in a row to make sure that we can move quickly to whatever way of working we want to in the future. And really, it's up to the business to decide which way they want to go. And from an IT point of view, we can really flex to whatever the needs are. So as in the future, it's more, this is the technology you have to use and this is how you use it. But now it's more, this is the technology and you can use it however you want. So those decision points, I think, have moved into the business rather than being in IT. And IT provides a platform, and then the business can decide how it wants to use that platform or platforms going forward. So I think it's really shifted the decision points and the decision around ways of working and actually how we operate as a company more into the business function rather than IT. So I think it's a really interesting dynamic shift, and I think that's going to make us more agile going forward, and that the power is in the hands of the people that are doing the business rather than in the IT constraining what the options are to how we work. So it's quite interesting.
Great, thank you. I'd just like to, so we'll move now, I think. Thank you everyone for their contributions so far. I want to make sure that we turn to the audience for their questions. So now is your opportunity to put forward the questions that you have to any and all of our panelists about what has been said so far. There's one question that's come in, James. I wonder if you can take first, which is just to give a little bit more detail around how Centrica has made this the virtual desktop solution work with its partner organisations and what challenges were involved there.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because that's one of the more challenging aspects of it, to make sure they've got the right technology to accept the solution or the platform that we're putting in place. And the way we did that was to make a code of connections. So we had a kind of a list of requirements that the third parties needed to meet before they could get onto our digital platform. And once they meet that, then they have to keep it up to date with whatever we stipulate, and that's a contractual thing as well. So we've made it really clear what the requirements on our third parties are to access our systems. Things like keeping the Citrix client up to date, making sure they've got the right network firewall in place, etc. So that's how we did that. We had a code of connections document that specified the requirements for that they needed to meet.
Steve, anything that you'd like to add about that particular aspect of deployment, I suppose?
I think the simple thing is the communication that we had with all the partners, and the way we were working was absolutely critical to make sure everybody was on board and going in the same direction. And it's such a basic thing, but something that really did help us get there as smoothly as possible. Just
to kind of put a picture around the number of users or the scale of that user base outside of Centrica core. So how many people are using it on a third-party basis, roughly?
So using the Citrix platform, okay, so there's around 7,000 concurrent users per day and just over 12,000 users in total. And of those, around just over 4,500 are third parties, maybe 5,000. The rest are in the UK. That's just in the UK, by the way. So yeah, they're the rough numbers.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, there's another question, James, for you about just a bit more detail on how it was that you got staff to change the way they work. I think you touched on your technology champions network, and also another around which is related about the kind of interface between HR and digital transformation. So I wonder if you could touch on those.
Yeah, so within my function, I have a digital adoption team. It's a team of only 2 people, but they're in charge of making sure the organisation adopts the tools and the digital tools, because there's no point in moving to Office 365 if you're not going to use the functionality. It's not worth the investment if you're just going to use PowerPoint exactly the same way you used PowerPoint 2016 or whatever you had before. So it was really key to us when we went on this transformation journey that we used the investment to bring the organisation forward technically as well. So that's where we formed the digital champions. There's 600 of them. They're led by the 2 adoption managers, and they're really change agents. So they drive the change throughout the business and make sure that each business function is getting the value out of the tools that they have access to. So before I mentioned Power Apps, Power Platform, and Power Automate, making sure that people are using that in the right way and thinking about it rather than going out and buying some software off the shelf. Could you just do it in 5 minutes yourself while you're eating your breakfast? And it's those kind of things that are really, really, really important. And that network really drives that forward. And there's a Power App that has all the digital champions in it. They share what skills they have, what area of business they're in, and they really form a community and help each other and drive through. So we have massive Power BI adoption, for example, that's driven by those digital champions. And then from the HR perspective and learning and development, we've built in some of those journeys into our learning and development plans. So people have the access to the Microsoft learning platform. They can talk to their digital champions. People are allowed time to use these apps and do training and part of their development plan. So we work closely with HR, learning and development to make sure that that's all going in the same direction, and we're getting the value out of the tools that we've invested in.
That's great, thank you. And another question, James, if you could pick up first, and then I'd like to ask for Steve and Ben's reflections as well. So this is specifically around for home working, how you found the majority of employees where they've had to use their personal devices. Has that allowed them to be really productive at home? Basically, how has that really worked? And roughly what the split is between bring your own device and corporate devices.
Okay, so we roughly have 1,800 people currently using personal devices. That's been quite an interesting journey. So the technology works fine. So people with the personal devices use Citrix. So they use the personal device as kind of a dumb terminal to access the Citrix cloud, and they use Citrix Access Gateway to sign on with Office 365 multi-factor authentication, and then they use all their apps on Citrix. We've had some interesting challenges around that, where Some people might want to use their home PC for their children to do their homework, etc. So there's been some challenges in that area, and we're looking to replace some of those devices where needed with Centrica devices. But overall, the technologies work fine. But I was a little bit surprised where some people weren't as keen to use a BYD model than I might have thought would have happened. So there was a few challenges around that, but we've got around those, and it's working well. Those people, that number's quite static now at 1,800. So, but the Citrix platform massively helps with that because it transports them into the work world away from their personal world. So yeah.
Great, thank you, James. I wonder, Steve and then Ben, if you could maybe add some thoughts on where you see the kind of the impact of coronavirus on kind of thinking about bring your own device and where you see that going.
So I think as James is mentioned there, we all did an amazing job of doing something that I'm going to call was survival. You know, we kept the business running, we kept taking the calls from Centrica's end customers, so everybody was getting, you know, a very comparable service. So we did that great job of survival through having that digital strategy and foundation already in place. I think what we've got to now look at, again, is that resilience word, is how do we make sure that we can have the resilience so this can potentially become an ongoing way of having the flexibility there all the time, but if you like, at scale without any questions, because, you know, at the minute, again, we've got the conflict from time to time of somebody wanting to use the internet, 5 people on the same bandwidth. And obviously it's a little bit more of a challenge with a BYOD to understand exactly what's happening on that device. So how can, as I say, we can make sure that we can embrace that as we need to if we need to survive, but how can we then ensure a maintained ongoing quality of service for more of an ongoing resilient way of working, bearing in mind, of course, we're in a regulated market. So it's just getting that balance as to how we can embrace, but how we can then make sure it's always going to be repeatable to maintain that quality of service.
Thanks. And Ben?
Sure. I mean, the mantra at Citrix, and we've been around for 30 years now, and ever since we were born, our kind of idea is work is not a place you have to go. And just a work is a thing you do. You should be able to work from anywhere on any device at any time. And that message has sustained us through 30 years of huge shifts in technology and transformation in general. But it's just stayed relevant, and even more so now. And the difference between hearing James's story and some of the other organizations that we work with is that the need to go out and buy a truckload of laptops or have employees coming into an office and literally take the desktop home with them is quite dramatic. And the challenges that we've seen organizations have who've had to do the former, buy laptops or collect desktops and take them home, opens up a myriad of, there's logistic issues with it, but there's also huge security concerns with that. And it's the ones that are have put in place the systems and the capabilities to work remotely and work from anywhere and do it securely, the ones that have found this transformation the most seamless. And there's huge benefits to that in the react phase, but also in the resilience phase, where you're not now left dealing with, well, what do I do with these desktops that contain all sorts of customer information that are sat on my personal Wi-Fi network at home? There are challenges that organizations are having to come to terms with now, that were kind of glossed over a little bit just because they needed to get people to work because we're running critical businesses here. But now, how do we deal with that? And organizations that have gone forward with digital transformation like Centrica they don't have those same concerns or worries. In terms of the long term, as people work from home more and the personal life and work life is going to blend more, I think we'll see a greater adoption of people wanting to use their own devices. And it's quite often I find that friends and colleagues of mine that the device they would choose to use isn't the one that the office supplies them. So we don't need to live in that world anymore. Those days are kind of, again, technology has been around for a long time to enable that choice. And the COVID experience has thrust the reality into being front of mind for everybody. Just showing what technology can do. And I think previously we just seen inertia to change. People are happy with status quo. We just ticked along, and the last few months has just shown, we've talked about the art of possible, we've seen the reality of what is possible and the speed at which it's possible. And I think it was really interesting to hear James talk about how they're going to review their whole decision-making process, and some of the steps it takes to implement change historically has been quite slow, and it's been slow for reasons, but now I think we've really challenged those reasons, and the ability for all organizations to move at a more digital speed is quite possible. And I think there's some good to come out of this. It's that ability for not just technical companies. You talk about Googles and Microsofts and the Amazons of the world moving very, very quickly and being incredibly agile, and how hard it is for utilities and others to do so. But in reality, I think we've shown that actually, despite the legacy footprints and having pre-existing data centers and systems that have been around for years, actually we can still move at far greater speed than we have in the past. And one of the other benefits actually that I'd just like to bring up, and maybe we put this into the discussion, is there's a sustainability angle to this as well. Coming out of data centers and moving into modern cloud-based DCs, there's a benefit there. From a sustainability perspective, there's an increasing sustainability benefit from having people working from home and avoiding the commute, and there's huge social changes that come from that as well, in terms of relieving the impact on our commuter systems, the trains, the buses, the planes. There's huge implications from this, and be interesting to see what kind of world we settle into, knowing that the technology allows us to be in a more flexible way, work in a more flexible way, and remove the stresses on life and on historic transport systems and ways of life. It's like, what are we gonna see in a year's time when we look back on this?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, really important perspective. James, maybe some reflections on that, but I will also, we're sort of starting to come towards our end of our time. I'll put one more audience question to James, maybe in addition to your reflections on that sustainability angle and how important that's been for Centrica. So the audience question was around, you raised the issue of IT support needing to kind of keep up now with this new world order, and around really kind of what changes you are considering, and how the pandemic has changed, and the home working environment has changed the kinds of demands that IT support has on it. So if you could maybe, I don't know which you would like to take first, the sustainability or the support angle.
Okay, I'll start with the support angle, and it's a really interesting challenge, because if you think about when people were based in office using a desktop, if they had an issue with that desktop, there would have been somebody there to support it, or they could have just gone to the desktop in the seat next door and use that. So they would have a downtime of like a few minutes while they swap devices. Whereas when you're working from home, you don't have that luxury. You don't have your living room full of spare desktops that you can just swap out with a broken laptop. So it's a very different environment from a support perspective. And we were finding that we were having some employees with extended downtime where they were waiting for the courier to bring a new device that had a hardware fault, etc. So we've been doing a lot of work on bringing down our device replacement speed. We've got it down to 2 days now, and we'd like to get it sub 1 day. We have a method to do that using a company called Buybox, which uses local pickup points, like a bit like an Amazon locker, so you can go and collect your device easily. So that was one of the big challenges. The other challenge as we've had is that people are using the home broadband, their own Wi-Fi in their own homes, and we don't, from an IT perspective, have control over that. So it's about making sure people have the right knowledge and understanding of how they can troubleshoot issues, how they can get back up and running quickly, and also people using personal devices, and making sure that the IT function is able to help those people when they do have issues. So remoting on, so we're using Windows Quick Assist at the moment to do that. Fujitsu developed a tool where we can use a camera on the person's phone to look at their screen or their broadband setup, so we can help them that way. So those are the kind of key challenges there that we've been facing. There's a lot of them, but we've been working through them and fixing them. So by the end of hopefully this month, we've been in a much better position from a support perspective. But also, in addition to that, the business has had to change their processes. So, for example, you think about a team leader assisting somebody in a call center. Previously, they would have walked over to them and helped them, whereas that's very different now. So they're using things like Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Quick Assist to really support their employees and make sure that they have the support they need. They're using Teams channels to have group chats, etc. So the whole support bubble and the whole support mentality has completely changed. So yeah, there's a lot of work needed in that space, more work than the tech almost. It's more difficult than doing the tech. And then just quickly on sustainability.
Yeah, very quick note, we're towards the end here.
Yeah, massive difference. Obviously, we can shut all our Citrix servers down at night. We're not using them, so our footprint is much reduced. So that's one of the benefits of moving to the cloud.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you everyone for listening. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Obviously, a huge thank you to all of our speakers for their contributions. If you're keen to learn more about Centrica's experience with particularly with the virtual desktop, the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that there is a webinar handout available which gives more detail on that work with Citrix and Fujitsu, and how the rollout was really achieved, which you can read at your leisure. For a slightly broader view on how digital transformation strategies at a range of companies have really responded to the demands of the pandemic, you can download a new report from Utility Week created in association with Citrix and Fujitsu, which takes a look at coronavirus digital transformation and utilities, and that report, actually a link will be sent to everyone who is registered for the webinar directly, so that you can easily find where to download that from. Finally, regular listeners to Utility Week's webinars will be pleased to hear that we are continuing our popular Ask Us Anything series throughout August, and our next event will take place at 11 o'clock next Friday, 7th of August. And that event will be taking a close look at how the nature of work and workforce will be changing as we start to, we hope, emerge from the most intense phase of the pandemic. Obviously, we've touched on some of those issues today, but we'll be taking a close look with an expert panel next week. For now, though, I hope that everyone has wonderful weekends. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you.